Well, once again, everybody, it is my pleasure to talk with our great representatives in the 35th. And now I've got State Senator Drew MacEwen on the line. Drew, how you doing?
I am great, Jeff. How about yourself?
I'm doing good, and this is a short session, and so I know it is real fast paced, and so there's a real intense look at the bills that are dropped into the hoppers and need to get across to the other body here. It doesn't take long for you to get in and out of session. So let's go through some of these.
Sure.
First things first, as a senator, talk to me a little bit about the priorities that you see for the 35th and what you're focused on.
Yeah. Again, being a short session, usually not a lot of major policy shifts. My focus is making sure that we do a supplemental budget that doesn't have tax or fee increases, and that we don't have a further erosion on property rights. So that my that's my first and foremost objective there is just to hold the line on those items. And then we've got a lot of contention around the Climate Commitment Act. We have the initiative that's has been provisionally certified. Should be formally given to the legislature here in the next week or so. And it's my hope that that we at least give it a hearing. And this is the initiative that would repeal the Climate Commitment Act. When you have 2.5 million people that have spoken up with their voices, I think it's vital that the legislature at least afford them the opportunity to hear it. I recognize that the majority in the legislature right now do not have a desire to enact it, so it'll most likely go to a November ballot. But I'm pressing to at least have the hearing so we can listen to the voices. This was the bill was passed during COVID. There was not the best atmosphere in which to conduct legislative business, and so a lot of voices were shut out. So I think it's very vital that we listen to them.
And on this, cap and trade, did I read something just the other day that either it had already raised or collected tons of money in, and people were going, well, now what's going to happen next? Was that one?
So we've had the way the Climate Commitment Act works. If you're deemed a large polluter in this state, it's a line that caps what emissions are between now and 2050, and then in 2050 it goes to zero. And so if you are a large polluter, you've got two choices: to either reformulate how that pollution is so that it's declining and you have to meet these targets each year, or you have to buy carbon credits on the auction market from the state. And that's where that money's been raised. So we've had 4 auctions since the bill took place, or the bill came into effect, and that's raised a few $1 billion, and it's more money than frankly the state knows what to do with.
Right.
That's kind of the rub with it a little bit, is that it's had a significant impact on gas prices and utility prices for consumers, and not a lot of relief in sight. And the state's awash in money, and again, not knowing what to do really with it.
So if this is either through the legislature or on the November ballot and it does get repealed, what's going to happen with that money that's already in the pot?
Yeah, I raised that question myself a little while ago, and I think realistically, the state would retain it. That doesn't mean I agree with that. But I think that's the political reality of that situation. But we'll see. I'm sure there'll be a number of things litigated regarding that, and it's just hard to tell. But I don't believe that this legislature would take any action that would return that money, so to speak. I just don't see that scenario.
And you mentioned 2.5 million Washingtonians have chimed in on their thoughts on this. That's obviously, when you talk about 4 auctions of credits, where are these voices coming from, and what are they speaking to? Is it the gas prices, or is it what are they speaking to?
When you talk to working families, they're between inflation and then our high energy costs that that's been imposed on them over the last 2 years, they're speaking to their pocketbook. And there are certainly those that fundamentally disagree with the entire cap and trade program. I think that's one component, but I think largely it's folks that have just had enough, and their savings have been wiped out through inflation, and they're facing these continuing high costs at the pump and through their utility bill. And you look at the rise in property taxes over the last few years. People have just had enough, and it's getting harder and harder to sustain that for working families in this state.
You mentioned that when the bill was going through during the pandemic, and I remember this as well, there was much less opportunity to talk during the sessions and during the working groups and things like that. Has that come back to what it was beforehand, or are you getting a sense that now maybe even in a hybrid fashion, people are able to still make their voices heard remotely, but then more are able to come to Olympia now?
So we're operating right now the way we used to, and that is we are in full session. We're in person. One of the I apologize about the dog barking. One of the
nothing wrong with that.
One of the things that came out of COVID, though, that I believe to have been a positive is that it showed we can do some things in terms of public testimony that make it easier for our citizens across the state to be able to testify. It's a lot to ask of somebody to drive a couple hours, or much less 6 hours, from the other side of the state to come and give 1 to 2 minutes worth of input on something. So one of the things that we retained from COVID was that remote testimony ability. And so what you see today in committee hearings, by and large, most people are in person testifying, but it has afforded people that are further away to be able to give their voice, to give their input on any piece of legislation, to be able to do it remotely. And that is one of the positive changes that the legislature made. And I think that is good.
Let's talk a little bit more about current events. There was, and you just put a bill into the cycle here. Over the weekend, there was a protest up in Seattle, south of Mercer. It ended up being about 5 hours, a 6-mile backup at some points. This was in protest of the Israeli-Gaza war that's going on. State Patrol said that there were no arrests made during that event because, according to them, large groups, it's hard to take large groups into custody at once, and it had the potential to turn an otherwise peaceful event violent. Talk to me a little bit about what the bill is that you just put through.
Yep. People certainly have the right to protest on whatever issue they feel passionately about. That certainly is not my issue with that. What I have an issue with is when you infringe on other people's rights. We have the right to free travel, and what if? And I'm saying this hypothetically, not necessarily to that event. What about an ambulance that was stuck there that had a guy suffering a heart attack and couldn't get through and get to the hospital? What about the working single mom that needed to get to work and she just burned through a tank of gas sitting there waiting? Those people that blocked the highway and shut it down for hours on end infringed on other people's rights. You do not have the right to do that. And I believe that the State Patrol could have and should have dispersed the crowd. I agree. You couldn't just arrest large numbers. You arrest the instigators and you disperse the crowd. And what this bill does that I introduced is makes it a gross misdemeanor to block a highway. And if you're ordered to disperse and you refuse to, it's now a felony. And it's time to restore law and order in the state. People, again, they've had enough. And again, you want to go and protest, you know what? Do it appropriately and do it in a manner that doesn't infringe on other people. And I'm here to speak up for the citizens of the state that have had enough with the flagrant disregard for public safety and for law enforcement. We need to be an orderly society, and that's the bottom line.
I was talking to Representative Couture this week, also kind of similarly on this topic. And let me get your thoughts on when it comes to these events, and if there is a crime that has been committed. Obviously, the State Patrol looked at the situation and they made a determination, but at the same time, laws had been broken. They had, trespassed, I suppose, things like that. Mandatory sentencing versus kind of a sliding scale on what could happen if you were arrested for these things? Where are you at on that? Do you understand what I'm saying there?
I do. The I think first and foremost, law enforcement needs to arrest folks that are doing this. These are not peaceful protests, and let's enforce the law. And the problem, in my opinion, that we saw in this particular instance is, the state patrol, is the lead agency on things that occur on a state highway, and the state patrol ultimately answers to the governor. And this administration, and we saw this when you had the CHOP or the Chaz, whatever you want to call it, has a tendency to look the other way when there are far left protests. And I don't know, that's something you got to ask him. And I think this is what comes from the top down, that, hey, we're not gonna interfere, because I think there's this fear from the governor of some major political blowback. I mean, come on. What about the rights of the other 8 million people in this state? And we need to begin to enforce it. And so, back to your question, though, on mandatory sentencing, to me, that's part of a broader judicial discussion. I think oftentimes the legislature, we make too many mandates on the courts. I believe in judicial discretion, but first and foremost, let's enforce the law and arrest, and then let the system do what it needs to do.
Plus, we all know too the struggles, especially in the 35th when it comes to jail availability, space, and things like that. So I know there's a whole host of other issues when it comes to that. 35th District State Senator Drew MacEwen, I know you got to get back out to the floor and work on the business at hand. You can always check in with Drew on his website, Drew MacEwen, that's one word, .src.wastateleg.org. I'll put the link to that as well. We will continue these conversations throughout the session, and I really, as always, Drew, really appreciate the access, and be well. We'll talk next week.
Sounds great, Jeff. Thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
All right.